What's up, my friend out in the World Wide Web? My name is Jesse, and today we are talking about plot holes. Thank you. Welcome to my channel. Now, as you may have noticed, I haven't been posting a whole lot recently, which I apologize for. It's been a crazy life where we moved, I graduated, we're having another baby, which is going to be awesome. We're expecting in April. So, I'm just really excited to get back to you guys and start these videos because stories are my passion. I love stories. So with nothing better to do, let's go ahead and talk about the topic, which is plot holes. Now, plot holes are a kind of a funny topic because you go through a movie or go through a story and you see plot holes. Sometimes they're very glaring, very, very obvious plot holes. They're like, oh, why didn't they just do this? Or why did they react like that? So there's different variations of severity. There are the highly kind of superficial plot holes where you could get away with it. And then there's other type of plot holes that are critical to the story that can actually ruin the story as a whole. So I want to talk about 6 different types of plot holes that I've discovered over the course of my research. The first plot hole I'd like to discuss is the McGuffin plot hole. This is where the McGuffin there's something fundamentally wrong with the McGuffin. So if you don't know what McGuffin is, I do a whole video about McGuffins. Click the card. I talk about McGuffins in Star Wars. So problem with McGuffins, sometimes the McGuffin themselves, there's something weird or something that doesn't logically make sense. So a couple examples of some plot holes that have to do with MacGuffins are Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant. Don't think about how you're not expected to think about how if Indiana Jones had not done anything and he just let the Nazis take the Ark of the Covenant, they could have just wiped out Hitler and all the Nazis all at once because they would have opened it with Hitler and then he would have had all the war taken care of if they'd done nothing. But I mean, here's the thing: that's not so severe, since the Indiana Jones may not have known that would have happened. As far as he knew, having that kind of power, he thought it was a powerful object, a powerful artifact, right? So there's that. You can forgive that. These MacGuffin plot holes tend to be a little bit more forgivable. Another plot hole is in A Wizard of Oz when Dorothy taps her feet. Saying, no, there's no place like home, right? Why didn't she do that at the beginning? Well, you might be able to come up with some logical explanation why, but the plot hole is still there. Another MacGuffin plot hole is Batman Begins, the microwave emitter. This one really doesn't make sense to me because they're putting the drugs in the water and it has to be taken in through the lungs. However, has nobody ever boiled spaghetti or taken a shower? So you would expect that the side effects of the drug to be apparent throughout the earlier in the movie or whatever. But these plot holes are a little more forgivable. Sometimes you just have to have a MacGuffin that does something to move the plot forward. So when you talk about MacGuffin plot holes, you have to be kind of forgiving. People tend to be people who notice these will be a little bit more nitpicky. But it doesn't hurt to think twice or 3 times about the MacGuffin you'll be including into your story. The second plot hole I would like to talk about is the logical plot holes. Now, in my opinion, these are the most forgivable plot holes. Okay, so a plot hole I would suggest is in Star Wars, right? There are fiery explosions in space. Now, space does not have fire. There's no oxygen to burn in space. So but that's the thing. Star Wars is not necessarily science fiction. Well, it is, but it's more of science fantasy because Lucas space is weird. It doesn't really make sense if in a realistic point of view. When you're talking about comparing like real space to Lucas space, they're completely different. But to keep this in mind, Lucas has created a world, and whatever he says goes, basically. So it's okay that there's this logical plot hole as long as he stays consistent to it. If there's explosions in Lucas space, then they need to continue to do explosions in Lucas space. It makes sense to the world that it's in. Another thing to consider with this logical plot holes is another Star Wars movie. You named it. The Last Jedi has a huge, glaring logical plot hole. Okay, think about this. They are running away from the First Order, the Resistance are, and they're running low on fuel. Is the First Order running low on fuel? Because they could have just, traveled ahead and intercepted the Resistance that easy. That one's a little bit hard for me to forgive, because it doesn't make logical sense that why would they not do this? They're running away. They could have projected where they're heading to. It just does. That particular one does not make sense to me, and it kind of really hurts the movie for me. Do you agree? Leave a comment. If you disagree, leave a comment as well. The third type of plot hole I'd like to talk about is the character type of plot hole. Now, characters should be consistent. If you establish a type of character, then they need to stay true to that and have their own logical story arc. For instance, let's say that Jerry the mage has come upon a dark secret, and the Dark Lord is out to get said Jerry the mage. Now, Jerry the mage comes across a fighter, a mercenary called William the Great, let's say. William the Great now has the responsibility of taking care of Jerry the mage. Over the course of the story, William the Great protects Jerry. Now, it comes to a certain point where Jerry and William get separated, and Jerry the mage is cornered into a very he's backed into a corner by the bad guys. Then out of nowhere, he starts kung fu fighting them, or fighting them with his sword, whatever. I'm just making this up. But after William discovers this, he's like, what happened there? It's like, oh yeah, Jerry says, I had 3 years of squire training. So that is extremely lazy writing, because you never established that Jerry the mage had any kind of weapon training whatsoever. So it's just really lazy writing. If you're going to do that, you need to incorporate that earlier on, because having that come out of nowhere is just poor writing. So the fourth type of plot hole I would like to talk about is the narrative plot hole. This is where you've established a set of rules in your book or story, and then you break those rules without explanation. So, for instance, Karate Kid. I love the movie, but however, there is a point in the movie where they say no headshots, right? And it's repeated several times, I think, by the referees. And then later on, Daniel's girlfriend says, "Oh, you just headshots fine, right? Anything above the belt." And then the final blow by Danny is the classic hiya. Whatever, I'm not a Karate Kid, but you get the idea. Like, it was a headshot directly to the head, and that is a direct conflict with the rules you've already established in the world. If you're gonna do that, there needs to be some kind of repercussion. Now there's a Netflix series called Cobra Kai where they kind of address this a little bit. But still, that original plot hole is still there. You're not going to be able to unsee it now. But the moral of the story is you need to once you establish rules, is to keep the rules consistent. Without that, you're going to have people criticizing your work. So watch out. The fifth plot hole I'd like to talk about is the Deus Ex Machina plot hole. This is where, at the end of the movie, there is a fantastic rescue story. In the 1978 Superman, there is a time where, Lois Lane has died. And then Superman flies around the world really fast, either going back in time or something, right? But there's no, it's alluded to that it's not a great thing. But why didn't he do that before? Why did he wait to this certain point? And is there any consequences to doing said time travel? It doesn't appear to be. So there's that one. It just doesn't make sense. It makes for actually a rather unsatisfying ending. Another Deus Ex Machina situation is where Samwise and Frodo are they've thrown the ring into the fires of Mount Doom, and they're stranded by the rivers of lava. And then comes the eagles to save them, right? So I understand where Tolkien is coming from a little bit, but here's that one for me is a little tricky because you have the eagles they could have made things so much simpler if they just carried the rings to Mordor. But there comes to a point where, as a storyteller, you don't want to solve all your problems with magic. And having that said, you want to make sure it's satisfying at the person. Now, in my opinion, when Frodo and Sam are being saved by the eagles, that's not necessarily a Deus Ex Machina, because they had already succeeded in their plot, in their quest. So having the eagles save them was more of a mercy of the universe. It's like, okay, since you have accomplished your quest, I will now save you. Now, it's interesting. This is a debatable topic, so I suggest, let's talk about it in the comments so we can, get a Discord going. And the sixth plot hole I'd like to resolve is the Unresolved Storyline plot holes. This is where it's the end of a story, end of a movie, and the end of a series, and there are still loose threads. For instance, a major one is Avatar: Last Airbender, where Zuko asks near the end, "Where is my mother?" And that big question right there is just left for us. Now, I understand that they have comics that kind of further explains what happened. Go ahead and check those out. Google it. It's legit. So they do explore that in a not in the series, but in the comics. But that right there, just like things like that, where you leave just unresolved things, just lying there. That's a plot hole that can be difficult to overcome, and the watcher, the audience, comes away a little dissatisfied. And those are my 6 plot holes I covered. Now, before you leave, there is a topic I want to talk about really quick. It's something called suspension of disbelief. Suspension disbelief is the idea that you go into a story and you may see some plot holes. You may see some inconsistencies, but there's a certain amount of forgiveness that an audience should extend to the writers, as long as you respect them, right? There are certain things, like I've explained before, that are just really not that forgivable. But there are some plot holes that are forgivable. And you'd have to suspend your disbelief in order to accept the story. So I would suggest being very forgiving to those stories and just look for ways to improve them in your own writing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you know of any other types of plot holes, leave a comment below, and we will see you in another video. Remember, it's not what you watch, but how you watch it that makes you a scholar. Farewell, my children.